All right, well, we're talking about how to sell your business for top dollar. Warren Buffett talks about the competitive moat, and he likes to have businesses with that deep and wide competitive moat. And those businesses are the most acquirable because you've got pricing authority and you can create a cycle that comes with pricing authority with higher margins and so forth. So it really comes down to one thing that you can dominate on. If you carry 40% equity, then they actually want you to work in the business usually for at least 3 to 5 years. So let's talk about some of the benefits of that first. So the benefit of using, private equity is that they don't have managers, right? So when you sell your company to a private equity group, if you want to stick around for the next 3 to 5 years, then that's not a bad idea. But the problem is, well, let me go with the upside first. The upside is there's a term that we use as business brokers, and it's called the second bite of the apple. And people use it all the time. And basically what it means is you sell your first tranche of equity, let's say 60% at a certain multiple. And then downstream, the second tranche of your equity at 40% gets up to being worth more because the private equity group has professionalized your business, right? That's what they basically tell you. The downside of that pitch is that when you do that deal, you now are a minority shareholder. And I'm going to tell you a real nightmare story of someone that I heard that did this. They had a private equity group. He sold it for 60% and he decided to carry 40%. But here's the problem. Listen, he was completely done. He was like, I don't want to run it anymore. But when he first told them, he was willing to stay on. But then after like a few months, he was like, I'm wiping my hands from this. I can't do it anymore. So the private equity group brought in a CEO. Well, the CEO didn't really know how to run the business or the industry. He knew nothing about it. And so guess what? The company just started to tank. And what they do is they have a line of credit that the private equity does. And the bank yanked the line of the credit and the company went bankrupt. And so his 40% went to zero. So I just want to give you the nightmare stories so you understand there could be a huge upside if you sell to up private equity, but there's a huge significant downside if you get it wrong. And I'll give you a perfect example. It's my favorite example of a guy named Blinds, from a guy who created blinds.com. And I just love this story, but he, started with blinds.com. His wife had a blinds business. And then he ended up creating blinds.com, which became the #1 online blind store. And so they got it, really got it up to #1. And guess who started looking at it? And the strategic acquirer was Home Depot. And Home Depot had two obvious problems. #1, they were having their lunch eaten by blinds.com in the blinds category, right? Because blinds.com was #1. And #2, they were actually being out-competed in the area of when you go to homedepot.com, when you're buying things, think about blinds. Like blinds are not really an easy thing. It's not like buying a book on Amazon, right? Like you have to measure it, you have to make sure it fits. And so not only was Jay Steinfeld is the guy's name, and not only was he #1 in dominating in the blinds category, but he had figured the secret sauce for how to sell complicated products that needed to be installed online. Like you buy it online, but then you have to get it installed, right? And so what does Home Depot have? Home Depot has, $100 billion worth of stuff that's complicated that needs to be installed. So not only they wanted to be #1 in the blinds category, but they wanted to figure out, okay, where did he get his expertise and his knowledge of how to sell complicated things across the board? Because if you're going to install blinds, it's probably the same way that you're going to install like a cabinet. There's similarities, right? So they had a strategic reason to buy blinds.com. And so that's what I want you to really understand, that story of why they were able to sell for such a high multiple. I had a friend who actually, it was called Kazam Bikes. She lived in Virginia Beach. And I asked her and she told me I could share her information. Her name is Mary Beth Lugo. She was on Shark Tank. And she ended up doing a deal with one of the Shark Tank guys, and she had a very good experience. She ended up selling the whole company afterwards. But I also had another friend that did a deal with Shark Tank, and she did it with Robert Herjavec. And he actually ended up selling for 15%. She never actually spoke with him she never even spoke to him ever. Like, she was like, I never even spoke to him. I sold 15%. It made a little bit of a difference. So when you're deciding whether you're going to sell to like a Shark Tank, or something like that, the biggest thing is, what are they going to do for you that you cannot do for yourself? And make sure that you understand, like one friend that I told you about that worked with Robert Herjavec, she's like, in my mind, I was like thinking, here, I've got this partner with Robert, and she never spoke to him ever once. Like, she never even saw him. While my other friend that sold the Kazam bikes, she worked with the guy with the Mavericks, and she actually did talk with him, and he was a little bit more involved. So let's kind of talk about, when you're working with a strategic partnership, one of the things you need to ask is, what is this person going to bring to the table besides money? That is one thing that we are helping businesses with over and over again. We just have someone that just bought about 5 HVAC companies, rolled them all up into one, and then turned around and sold it for an even higher multiple.